Shri Vineet Jain, Managing Director of the Times Group, distinguished organizers of this event, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a great pleasure to be here in your midst. I would like to thank the Times Group for inviting me for this very timely and important event, the Economic Times SDGs Summit 2020, on the theme, Reimaging Our Planet, Building Back Better. This year, 2020, marks the 5th anniversary of the adoption of the 2030 Agenda. We now have 10 years left to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. In fact, the international community at the SDGs Summit in September 2019 in New York adopted the call for a decade of action and delivery for sustainable development. They also pledged to mobilize finance, enhance national implementation, and strengthen institutions to achieve the SDGs. But little did they realize that we will have a pandemic which will not only disrupt our lives, but also threaten to set back the realization of the SDGs. That's why this SDG Summit 2030 is indeed very timely. It is interesting that when the SDGs had come up for discussion several years ago, many developed countries did not want the SDGs to be discussed and decided by all UN member states in an open and transparent manner. They had wanted the SDGs to be done in a manner similar to the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs, which, as you all know, were not negotiated. It was only thanks to developing countries like India, Brazil, and others that we ensured that the negotiations for the SDGs were done in the United Nations in a member-driven process in an inclusive and transparent manner. And the results are there for all of you to see. But more importantly, since every member state had participated in the process in the UN, every one of us now have a stake in ensuring that the success and the realization of the SDGs. Consequently, at a time when the world is almost at a standstill, the member states of the United Nations need to come together to honor their commitments and to collectively ensure that the SDGs are achieved, since every one of us had participated in the process to begin with. Achieving sustainable development, especially eradicating poverty, reducing inequality, and combating climate change, requires the government, private sector, and civil society working together. I therefore commend the Times Group for their initiative in getting all the stakeholders to come together in this event. In spite of all the challenges it poses, COVID-19 has given us an opportunity to re-image our planet and see whether we can indeed build back better. Even as we pick up the pieces from where we left off before the pandemic, it is important for us to keep in mind that the current situation demands a fresh mindset where approach to development should be human-centric. Therefore, when we look at initiatives which we need to take during COVID and post-COVID, we should never forget to put the human being at the center of it all. As Mahatma Gandhi says, the greatness of humanity is not in being human, but in being humane. Ladies and gentlemen, achievement of the SDG goals has always required a multi-dimensional whole-of-society approach. Consequently, in the face of COVID-19, it has become even more necessary to sustain a multi-pronged approach to not just achieve the SDGs by 2030, but also build back better. In this, the United Nations and its organs certainly have an important role to play, and it is necessary that they shape an effective response It is equally necessary for the member states to set aside their narrow focus on certain specific issues and come together to make the difference between making this decade merely a decade of recovery from the pandemic and making this decade a decade of action to achieve SDGs. At the UN level, realizing the need to look at innovative solutions, the UN Secretary General in 2019 convened the Global Investors for Sustainable Development Alliance as a part of his strategy for financing the 2030 Agenda. It has more than 30 influential leaders from the corporate world with the aim to leverage their insights for mobilizing resources for sustainable development. At the recently concluded SDG Business Forum, UNDP, the UN Global Compact, and the International Chamber of Commerce have established the COVID-19 Private Sector Global Facility, a global initiative and collaboration bringing together public and private sector partners to help local communities recover better from the pandemic. According to UNCTAD, developing countries face an average annual funding gap of around US dollars 2.5 trillion in SDG-related sectors. The gap is likely to widen with the impact of COVID. It is evident that this target cannot be achieved by the government alone. While public financing remains critical, private sources of investment are essential to meet the scale required. This is where the partnership between stakeholders, both national and global, become crucial for achievement of SDGs. Ladies and gentlemen, India has recently been elected to the UN Security Council for the term 2021-22 with overwhelming support. This is a recognition of the initiatives taken by our Prime Minister to reach out to all countries around the world, as well as of the way the world perceives us. But we take our place in the Security Council at a very critical time, quite different from what we have ever witnessed in recent times. As Prime Minister underlined in his address to the United Nations General Assembly just 2 days ago in the high-level segment, the requirements and challenges of our present as well as our future are vastly different from those of the past. He made a clarion call that reform in the responses, in the processes, in the character of the United Nations is the need of the hour, and that India can no longer be kept out of the decision-making structures of the United Nations. He pledged to use the prestige and experience of the world's largest democracy for the benefit of the whole world. The priorities which we have set for ourselves during our stint in the Security Council reflect our aspirations to make this a better world with greater prosperity, peace, and security. And for SDGs to be achieved, we need to ensure a forward-looking agenda in the overall context of development, peace, and security, and this is precisely what India has put forward. Our priorities include fighting terrorism, including cross-border terrorism, strengthening peacekeeping, an area where our peacekeepers have done pioneering work and several have laid down their lives in service of mankind. Taking up Prime Minister's agenda of reformed multilateralism, especially in the context of the reform of the Security Council. Using technology, especially digital technology with a human face, to bring about change in the lives of people as we have done in India. Greater involvement of women and youth. And strengthening peace building through development, human rights, democracy, and institution building. It is an ambitious agenda, but we are determined pursue these. We are confident that our presence in the Security Council and our priorities will contribute to building back better and pave the way for the international community to achieve SDGs with a more inclusive and collective endeavor. Ladies and gentlemen, India remains committed to achieve the SDGs. Our successful presentation of the Voluntary National Review Report for the second time at the high-level political forum in July this year is a testimony to this fact. In our second report, we made a paradigm shift to a whole of society approach with Government of India engaging with local governments, civil society organizations and local communities, people in vulnerable situations and the private sector. Prime Minister Modi also participated in July this year in the high-level segment of ECOSOC, a charter body of the United Nations whose first president, incidentally, in 1945 was an Indian. Our Prime Minister underlined India's commitment towards reformed multilateralism with a reformed United Nations at its center. India's progress in SDGs is crucial for the entire world, as the country is home to about 18% of the world population. We have mirrored SDGs in our national development agenda. We have kept sustainability and self-reliance as the focus of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Ladies and gentlemen, while India has pursued fulfillment of its SDG goals with determination, we have not forgotten our responsibility to other fellow developing countries to help them achieve theirs. India's contribution to South-South cooperation is making a huge impact and will in many ways enhance the implementation by developing countries of the 2030 Agenda. I can say without hesitation that our development partnership has evolved to become a complete and comprehensive framework touching upon the entire spectrum of human endeavor. India is not just a country, but is also a great civilization. And our partnership with other countries has grown organically over several decades, if not centuries. Consequently, we have almost always kept the larger picture in mind when we take steps in our foreign policy, since one cannot develop bonds of brotherhood and friendship overnight. Apart from traditional forms of development assistance like lines of credit, which is now over US $30 billion, grant assistance, which again is very large, high impact community development projects, technical consultancy, capacity building, especially under our iTech program, which now covers more than 160 countries, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, etc. We are also venturing into new sectors, improving delivery and innovation on existing services and exploring new ways of doing things. Even during COVID times, India has ensured medical supplies and humanitarian assistance to more than 150 countries. 3 years ago, India established the $150 million India-UN Development Partnership Fund at the United Nations to provide support to projects in developing countries and contribute to the achievement of sustainable development goals. In just 3 years, this fund has approved 59 projects in as many as 48 partner countries. The fund is now refocusing on helping nations cope with the COVID-19 pandemic by supplying medical equipment, building healthcare capacities, etc. India has truly reached out to all countries, reflecting our ethos of Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam. Ladies and gentlemen, what we aim to achieve initially is to bring all stakeholders together and to first appreciate the overall context in which countries around the globe, including India, are trying to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Next, to recognize that COVID-19 has indeed widened the gap between what is being done and what is yet to be done. And finally, see how you, as representatives of the corporate world or the civil society or of other areas, how you can use your CSR and other means to bridge this gap and impact the lives of our citizens in a positive manner. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are at the cusp of a historic moment. The actions that we take today will define the future of generations to come, not just of our own society, but the world at large. The COVID-19 pandemic provides us with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get things in order. We should use SDGs as a springboard to bounce back faster and further in this decade of action. Ladies and gentlemen, before I conclude, I would like to recall what Swami Vivekananda said, and I quote, "Every idea has to become broad till it covers the whole of this world. Every aspiration must go on increasing till it has engulfed the whole of humanity, nay, the whole of life within its scope." Unquote. I wish the Times Group and the SDG Summit 2020 all success. Thank you very much.